Welcome back to the At the Yard podcast. Today's guest is a young man who has seen his career go from UC Riverside to Santa Clara to Portland to Wazoo to now the University of Michigan. And I'm speaking of the one and only Jake Valentine. And Jake, man, again, can't thank you enough for doing this. And welcome to the At the Yard podcast, man.
I appreciate you having me, Les. It's we go way back, so this I was fired up when this became an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I touched on that, kind of the transition from Riverside to Santa Clara to all the other places, and now Michigan. Walk us through your coaching journey, right? And how you started, and ultimately how you had landed at the University of Michigan.
Okay. Yeah, so it actually reversed a couple years even before Riverside. I was on the islands. I went to school in Hawaii. And so I was on the islands waiting for my then girlfriend, now wife, to finish school. And I was in a corporate sales job and was making probably more money than I'm even making today. And but hated the day to day of it. And random enough, my former coach got offered the volunteer assistant job at Stephen F. Austin, a smaller D1 down in Texas. He did not want to leave the islands, and actually told them that, hey, this Valentine guy is going to be a good coach. He just doesn't know it yet. And I mean, I honestly, you get done getting your degree. So college students, you don't have to have it all figured out when you graduate. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. And he kind of plugged me in there. And I was at that point in my life where I was just kind of open to anything. And, I was really lucky that I did a good job on the interview, because I had no idea where Stephen F. Austin was. Nacogdoches, Texas is where it was, which is deep East Texas. It's actually closer to like Shreveport, Louisiana than anything.
Wow.
Um, so I was way down there. Johnny Cardenas was the head coach at Stephen F. Austin. Um, you know, we built a really good relationship, moved down there, worked for 2 years there. Was really, really lucky to be surrounded by good coaches. Chris Conley, the hitting coach, and then Chad Massengale, the pitching coach, who's now at Texas State. And we were lucky to have a really, really good group of dudes. So Bryson Miles, I think he was a fifth rounder, Hunter Dozier, first rounder. We had a bunch of arms get popped out of there as well. So I think we had 36, 38 wins first two years there, and that kind of propelled me um, into working at UC Riverside under Doug Smith, whose number I think it was like 2 days ago got
Yeah,
retired.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's
about time
sweet.
UC Riverside.
Yeah.
Doug Smith is, for those that don't know, in California, because he has been retired, I think, for a number of years now. But you can link majority of the success of a lot of head coaches in Southern California right now to their experience with Doug Smith. He
On,
is, in
on a
my
bunch of different levels too, right? Like
yeah,
high school all the way up.
yeah. I think from just like a managing of people standpoint, and just a genuine, I guess, just the ability to allow coaches to be genuine to themselves. I think Doug is um, amazing at that, and I still call Coach Smith, you know, every couple of weeks, and it's always the start of the conversation is always the same. Coach, how you doing? He's like, man, Tino, I haven't lost the game in over 10 years, so I'm doing great. So, but he's the man, and he's probably the best golfing head coach I've ever been around too. But then from there, we lucked out. We had a really, really good group. Had majority of our starting lineup drafted my second year there, and then unfortunately, Coach Smith had some knee issues and just all kinds of just kind of all boiled into one kind of storm. So he retired. He's one of those guys, like, if he wouldn't have retired, I'd probably still be at UC Riverside working for that guy. Like, that guy's the best. But retired, kind of spread my wings and flew a little bit up to Santa Clara. Worked with an unbelievable staff, Dan O'Brien, Gabe Rebus, Keith Beauregard. Keith and Gabe both currently work for the Detroit Tigers right down the street from us. So that's been fun too. Um, and then, again, really lucky to have really good players around us. Had a bunch of draft picks. Jose Vizcaino went, I believe, the 6th round. A couple other guys. But anyways, did that and then had the opportunity to go home where I'm originally from. So right across the river from Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, where I'm from. And they were building a new staff to, flip the University of Portland program. Coach Loomis got the head job. I was hired by him when he got the head job, went up there. And at the time, I want to say we were, I think, 295th out of 300 teams rankings in the country at that point. So we had some work to do. Took us some time. Luckily, administration allowed us that time. And then, by the end of it, I think we built a really good product up at Portland that's, day in, day out playing for the championship. Had a bunch of All-Americans, freshman All-Americans. And then from there, I went to Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. Worked for Brian Green. We had a really, really good group. We did some awesome stuff together while we were all there. And then Brian and Anthony Claga ultimately went to Wichita State. And then there was a coaching change at Washington State, obviously, with that. Nate Choate came in there. I had planned on being there at Washington State. And then Tracy Smith, came a calling, and the rest is history. I just finished my first year. So starting my second year at University of Michigan as the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator for Tracy Smith, which we all call Skip. And Skip has been nothing short of amazing to work for. And, I think when you pair up a Hall of Fame coach and you combine it with the 4th winningest college baseball program in the history of college baseball, there's some fun stuff that can come together with it. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, let me go back to a couple of things there that you touched on. So you're graduating school, don't know what you're doing. You go to Stephen F. Austin, dang near on the Louisiana border. I mean, did you have kind of an aha moment at Stephen F. Austin, or was it somewhere else where it was like, dude, I want to do this the rest of my life?
Yeah. Honestly, it was about 2 weeks in to working at Stephen F. Austin. And it was like back in the day before all the rule changes, like we were volunteers, right? At that point. And so like it was a true volunteer standpoint. Because the amount of salary the other paid assistants had to use the camps to supplement their income too. So like the only thing I was getting was lessons. So I was rocking, 45, 50 lessons a week to pay the rent. But I remember very vividly just like coming home dog tired, exhausted because it's Deep East Texas, so it's humid nonstop as well. So, but I'd get back and I've never been so happy being tired. Like it just, your day is fulfilled. The energy you put in, like being able to see the players reap the benefits of it. It was outstanding. And, I was lucky again, cause I was surrounded by guys that had a lot of success doing it. So I was able to, I don't know, kind of get up to speed really quick, and working for Johnny, former big league catcher. And it was an awesome experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
How do you prepare your then girlfriend, now wife, for the life of a coach's wife? Right? I mean, it's not an easy job, man. I mean,
No,
it's. I tip my cap to coaches' wives every time I see them, and so like, how do you prepare your again then girlfriend now wife for this life that is vagabondish?
yeah. So I think the best way to describe the life of a coach's wife is minus if you're just reading into like the ability to pick up and move on and kind of do it is pretty similar to like a military family. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare us to a military family
Right,
because
right.
what they do is way more important to our world. But no, I think you can't prepare them till they actually get into it. But I would say um, for a coach's wife, it's you got to be a very independent person because you are going to have to spend a lot of time by yourself, unfortunately, just with how much we have to recruit and travel and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I remember being real honest with her. I was like, because she actually had an awesome job working for Golf Canada at the time, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna move to Nacogdoches, Texas, and I'm gonna be a baseball coach, and we're probably gonna have to move a lot. And I probably won't be home a lot. Like, if you're good with that, we should move
We-
on with this. Otherwise, we should probably move on the other way.
yeah.
And probably much to her family's dismay, she decided to move down to Nacogdoches, Texas with me. So, and then the rest is history. I mean, she is the glue that holds our family together. She's the best athlete in our family. She's the strongest person in our family. So yeah, I owe my career, honestly, my ability to continue to do what I love and chase my passion to my wife. She's made everything possible. So.
That's awesome. And so you touched on the recruiting a little bit. Let's jump into that. I mean, now that you're at University of Michigan, one of the things that's always really stood out to me about you, Jake, is that it didn't matter where you were at, you were always recruiting and watching the best players, right? So it's whether you were at Riverside, whether at Portland, where or any stop in between, you were always there to watch the best players, right? Get that assessment of those best players and ultimately try to recruit those players. And now that you're at Michigan, you talked about it, fourth winningest college baseball program in history. There's a little cachet there, right? That maybe some of your other stops didn't have. So how has that changed? Are you still at Michigan looking for the best players available, and what qualities, in your opinion, make those guys the best players available?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we're always trying to get the best player, right? Like, period. Because us coaches, we can pound our chest and be like, man, we are the best coaches ever. But like, you know what really good coaches have? They have really good players. And then coaches that maybe look on are like, oh, they're not very good coaches. They probably just don't have that good of players because players can make up for a lot. Um, that being said, like there's obviously some intangibles that we're looking for. I think the overall athleticism is obviously what every coach is trying to find, and obviously in my career, the long levered tall athletes has kind of been my calling card at different places that I've been. Um, for me, that's what has worked. The cool part of Michigan, man, is that Block M. It allows you to have conversations with people that in my career I haven't been able to have, or I guess maybe I still try to have the conversation beforehand, but usually it wasn't reciprocated on the other end. Um, and I get it, right? It's
It
kind of like
happens,
it's kind of like dating, right? You get the worst thing they can say is no, so
right?
might as well give them a call anyways. Um, but yeah, I mean, Michigan is what it is. So I think when we're looking at the best players, I think obviously just like any high academic institution, the academics are going to really fall into place and make it a deal breaker. But it makes it a little bit easier. So that way, it's more of a rifle approach, clear and concise and focused, as opposed to a shotgun approach where you're just trying to grab and because being a Michigan man's a real deal. So like, we have to do our due diligence on the backside, both from an academic standpoint, a personality makeup standpoint. And I think that's if I'm, obviously I think anybody on the field can tell you who the best player is. I think that's the easier ish part. Obviously projection, guys have skills at being able to project guys too. That's huge. But um, I think finding the right guy with the right amount of ability that fits with your personality and your style, I think that's kind of the magic in the sauce is being able to match whatever your pitching coach does well. You want a pitcher that benefits from that relationship. Same thing on the hitting side. Like, hey, I know my hitting coach can do this really, really well from a development standpoint. So I'm going to make sure I match that up with the type of athlete that I'm bringing in on that end. And I think that's where the magic can happen a little bit from a recruiting standpoint.
So you've always recruited California really well, right? Really heavily. Obviously, when you were in California, that's a no-brainer. But even when you've been out of state, you've always kind of had a focus on California. So when you look at California players, like, do you see specific qualities or traits that maybe separate those guys from players from other parts of the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just from if you just go from the honest standpoint that it's sunny in California all the time is that they just get more baseball in, especially on the position player side. I would say is like they just have thousands and thousands and thousands of more reps out on a field, so they're a little bit further ahead. But I think you can also kind of balance that out across the country in regards to that's I think that's where you have to judge like how you're recruiting because there might be a Midwest guy whose ceiling is a lot higher. He just needs to get to that point. And then you have a guy from California maybe whose floor is a lot higher, but maybe the ceiling is a little bit shorter. So I think that's where the balance of coming in of what you need. But yeah, I mean, California guys have. I think that was like the big talk last year was, in the College World Series and stuff like that. Everyone's like, "Oh, there's no schools from the West or whatever." Well, that's because all the players on the teams that were in the College World Series were all from the West. So I think it's kind of that mix of everything, and obviously, the university that I'm at's a national brand, so we're going to pull from everywhere. But yeah, I think historical and analytical stories and data would show that. Um, if you have a lot of California kids on your roster, you're probably going to have a little bit of success.
Uh, you touched on it a little bit, the ability to play year round, basically, right? California versus other parts of the country. Do you think, though, other players from other parts of the country are catching up, with the rise of the indoor facilities, the ability to practice on turf and do all that stuff? I mean, I go out to the future games like you do every year. And I mean, I'm in awe of some of these guys from, these cold weather states that are big physical dudes that can really play the game.
Yeah, I think I definitely do think that in the cold weather, and obviously, if you follow my track record, I've enjoyed my time in cold weather states. But I definitely do think that like both travel baseball, training facilities, like you name it, I think everybody's getting more organized and more. Um, yeah, I just think they're doing a better job of giving those guys the ability to get better. Um, like obviously in California, you have the ability to use outside to your advantage. I think in the cold weather, I think the fact that they're building all these awesome training centers and you have a lot of ex pros and ex college guys willing to give back and help train. I think it's really helped our game as a whole. So it's been fun to watch. I mean, it was fun for me going through the Big Ten last year and seeing some of these absolute monsters that are going high in the draft that
Yeah.
if we're on the West Coast probably didn't make it to campus. So I think it's like it's always a balancing scale. So yeah, it's been fun.
So let's talk about recruiting a little bit more here. And obviously, it's changed dramatically in recent years. And from your standpoint, right, moving from the West Coast to the Midwest, and having maybe a little bit more feel for what's going on the East Coast, like how do you personally view the current state of recruiting, and what do you think some of the biggest challenges are that you've had to adapt to?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with the new rules in place is just us not having any idea of what it's actually going to look like. Because the hard 34 came down, but then the judge last week didn't ratify it. So, is it 2 weeks from now? Is it going to get ratified, or is it going to be stuck in the appeals process for 2 years? So like I think the hard part in my position as the recruiting coordinator is like trying to read minds, and I guess not because the ultimate thing in this and I is we don't want to walk back conversations with families, right? Because
Right.
the amount of effort and relationship and time that everybody has put into each other to find the right fit, when you have to walk back those conversations, it sucks, and it's not fair for either side. Now that being said, like with if the new rule goes into effect, it's kind of like nobody's fault, if you will. It's just like um, it is what it is, and so I think both parties have to like come to an understanding and kind of try to figure everything out for the best for the student athlete that's there. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part is just the not knowing. I mean, even to the scholarship allotment standpoint is I think everybody across the country, I would say probably on the outside are trying to tell people, yeah, we're going to be fully funded and have 34 full rides. And if I was a betting man, I'd probably say that they're completely full of it. Just because in the grand scheme of things, like, yeah, it sounds good. But when you look at it from both a Title IX standpoint and an overall financial standpoint, the numbers don't really match up to allow that to actually happen if they were to want to do that or if they had the ability to do that. And obviously I don't know what other people are talking about, but you know, I think the up in the air part has been the toughest in the recruiting. Like to be a high school player with the portal involved and all the different rule changes and stuff. Um, it's kind of like the same as our college guys trying to play pro ball. It just gets harder and harder with the lesser amount of spots that are becoming available. So I
It's like the
think,
top of the funnel's gotten narrower, hasn't it?
yeah, I mean, I think it's never been harder to play Division I baseball at a high level than it has now. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I'm glad you touched on the portal because that was going to be my next question. It's like, it's simple, Jake, is how do you balance recruiting high school guys versus portal guys, right? I mean, we're at a lot of the same events, you and I, during the summer. And, I might be at a few that you're not and vice versa. But, I try to have conversations with as many coaches as I possibly can. And I talk about the portal and how they're handling the portal and things like that. And, you know, sadly, you hear everything from, yeah, we love high school guys. We're going to build our foundation with high school guys and maybe bring in a portal guy or two, versus the other end of the spectrum is, why am I going to recruit a guy and hope that he develops when I can go get a college ready player out of the portal? And so there's got to be a balance in there somewhere, and it's got to be different for each program. I get that. But for you guys, what is the approach for the University of Michigan when it comes to, recruiting high school guys versus portal guys?
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
I
I
should
think,
I should probably say and portal guys, right? Because you're
yeah,
very clearly you have an eye on that.
yeah, I think from the academic standpoint of a school like Michigan, like, because talking in generalities here is like, I don't think those high academic institutions can ever really sustain of being like a portal U for, but I do think that there's going to be times whether it's draft, graduation, or that there's going to be a gap that needs to be filled. Um, and I think using the portal is a good tool for that. Um, and like you, I mean, I've heard good, bad, and different, like all the different views, and I think um, I've had experiences on both sides of it where, um, there's dudes that probably never would have got the opportunity that they got if there wasn't a transfer portal. I mean, I know there's a guy from Southern California that went into the portal and then hopped in. I was able to snag him a couple years ago. And now he's in Double A, and he was at a D3 before that. Nobody knew about him. So I think there's cool experiences for both, and yeah, there's definitely going to be negative experiences for both sides. But I think it's just again, I think it's just a tool, and I think both high school, JUCO, um, and portal. I think each university is so unique to themselves and what their academic standard is, what their money allotment is, like like, and I think so. It's just case by case. I don't think anybody can say one way or the other on. And I apologize for sounding like Switzerland or whatever, but um, like, I think it's just so unique year to year and, institution to institution that, I think it can be a huge benefit for both. But I think when we're talking about this, I think that's the part that high school players need to understand is like a lot of people in our industry, when they are recruiting, they're literally with the new roster changes. It's like, okay, I have a portal guy who has 900 career plate appearances and has hit 300 at every spot they've been at, or I have a high school guy that I'm trying to project that's going to be good. And I think with the stresses of a lot of administration and the ability to have or the necessity to have to win now, I think coaches honestly feel that pressure. And so I think I think when you get that answer you heard that you said earlier, like, why wouldn't I just go get a proven guy or whatever? I think there's
Yeah.
a lot to that. Because, our game has, especially in the last 2 years, right, has really transformed into an old physical game. Like, you got to be old and you got to be physical. And so I think learning how to blend all three of it, both JUCO, high school, portal, I think that's the magic sauce. So,
Right.
if you find if somebody on this podcast has it all figured out, could you just send it to me so that I can make my life a lot easier? So,
No, so totally right. Um, uh, on that point, though, right? So the portal versus high school versus JUCO working all together. How has that affected player development, in your opinion? From hey, like I'm not getting a chance here, right? I got 20 at bats, whatever, my freshman year. I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere else. Versus bringing in a 1 year, for a lack of better terms, rental. What's the impact, both in the now and long term on player development from your perspective?
yeah, so I think that's the interesting part that I tried to consciously be concerned about through the portal season was like, I think our game, and this isn't the player's fault, this isn't the coach's fault. I think it's just like the mechanics of how it's set up has made the recruiting process a pretty transactional one at times. And so trying to continue to stay in that transformational relationship style of recruiting, I think has really helped us in regards to getting the right guys because you can still be that guy for them. So getting to what you're talking about is, I think it just depends again, case by case, in regards to are they really diving in to develop the player, and be hard on them and be willing to maybe upset the apple cart so that you know if they didn't have fun they were gonna hop in the portal. I think that's the biggest balance is when you're trying to work on player development. Um, you know, I know other coaches are like, man, yeah, I just try to be super simple because I don't want them to feel like I'm changing anything with them or whatever, because with portal and everything. And I mean, that's a tough way to go about it, but yeah, I think it's probably going to affect them a little bit because you're going to have different styles and different changes. So maybe it won't be like a clear cut transition as opposed to when you have somebody for 4 years and and you have a specific plan for them, you can really see like the growth on it. The part that I think is the hardest part that I don't think a lot of people talk about is the like transfers of credits and everything. I think that's the part that some of these guys that have transferred 2 or 3 times, and again, everybody has a completely different situation. So some of those are beneficial, some of those aren't.
Right.
But yeah, I think not just from a baseball standpoint, but I think from an academic standpoint, it's pretty hard to continue to develop. And then honestly, I think the biggest piece that gets affected is the relationship standpoint. Is when when you're when you're in uh, a program for 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, or three if you get drafted, is you know I think those guys that are sharing that locker room with you for 3 years, 4 years. I mean, those are your brothers, and those are the guys in your wedding. And I think that's the most important piece of this. And I think sometimes that gets lost when you just have a bunch of portal guys that are in there for a year and out. Is the relationship pieces aren't really meshing or working. So I think that's the other part you have to be careful about on the balance is, um, making sure that the locker room is still staying healthy, because ultimately, us coaches, we can want it for anybody, but if the locker room doesn't want it more than the coaches, it's not going to work out well.
Yeah, and all it takes is one sour apple, right? And
Yeah,
I mean
you
that
just
could be
hope that
damn
your culture is strong enough that they weed out
right,
the yeah. But
right,
again,
right.
that's what our job is on the recruiting side, to hopefully weed that out before they show up.
Yeah. Let's switch over to NIL real quick. And, that's obviously been a game changer in the college landscape. And, I without obviously getting too specific or naming names or anything like
Yeah.
that, I'm sure you have a horror story or two that you could share. And if not, that's fine. But I'm interested in what's Michigan's approach to using NIL to their favor for the baseball program.
Yeah, so obviously, us coaches, we don't have anything attached to the NIL, but I do know our champion circle has done a great job for our student athletes. And I think I don't really know because I'm not in those conversations, but I think that a lot of times they're just using um, the deals and stuff that they can get more so to like bridge the gap as opposed to like a pay for play or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, I think they, it's more of a genuine how NIL was originally supposed to be set up. Um, I think, I think that's what the champion circle does. Again, I don't have any idea honestly, but that's between the players and them. But yeah, I mean, I hear about all the horror stories and um, all that. You know, I think we'd be hard pressed not to know who some of the offenders are on some of that stuff and all that. But
Right.
um, I think it is what it is. I mean,
Do you think it's leveled the playing field, or do you think it's just caused more craters?
I think it's caused more craters. And then hearing what the rules going forward are, if those get ratified, I think that'll um, help balance everything back out. Just with, you know, I think when student athletes potentially could be considered employees and you start signing contracts and stuff like that, so then there can be a collective bargaining agreement and
Yeah.
kind of not limit, but maybe regulate the NIL piece a little bit. So, um, if somebody's not going to get $800,000 for doing one tweet, like they'd actually have
Right.
to
Right.
do some stuff.
Earn it.
Yeah. So I think I think the more regulations that comes out with it, it'll probably clean it up a little bit. But
Yeah.
again, like that's big boy territory for administration stuff like that. So I try to not touch it. But
So when you bring that all together, you bring in the transfer portal, you bring in NIL, you bring in the abundance of talent that's out there, and uh, you kind of mesh it all together into this new landscape of baseball recruiting. What are the biggest challenges, man? I mean, I think sourcing information is probably pretty easy for you at this stage in the game, in terms of your relationships and then everything that's available through social media and websites and things like that. But what do you view in this new world of recruiting to be some of the bigger challenges in recruiting for college baseball?
I think the density of the schedule in regards to how many events uh are in, different places around the country at one time, just because of like the built-in dead periods and stuff are great. Like it's awesome, but what it does is it cuts away from like the ability to spread out the events. So like now it's like 10 events on the same weekend, and it's trying to figure out how to cover it effectively. I'd say that's probably the hardest part, in my opinion. But um, in regards to like the challenges and stuff like that, I think everything's only a challenge if you view it that way. So I think just trying to figure out, hey, what's your niche? Where you know, how are you going to wear how are you going to, we're baseball coaches. We find the gray area of everything. And, so just trying to figure out how to circumvent the system and use it to our advantage, I think is the constant goal. But yeah, just I think if you look at from like an overall development of like what kind of players we're recruiting every single day, I think there's a little bit of challenge there. Um, just because with the amount of events, the density of the events, and the changes in the recruiting, I think the hard part is knowing that you might only see that kid once, and having and being able to trust your eye and your evaluation skills to be able to make a decision off just seeing them one time, just because of the pace. Because I think when they changed the rules to stop allowing the early recruiting, I think it was good, but like I think then what you see is now there's so much good talent that are a little bit older and more developed, is like everybody sees them at the same time. So like everybody's trying to get it done as fast as humanly possible. And so like if you get to see a kid three times, like that's got to be the rarest thing ever. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably the difficult piece is, you don't want to make a mistake for both parties. But you also have to work at a certain pace. Um, so yeah, I think that's one of the major difficulties.
You talk about the density of the schedule, and I mean, I saw you in Georgia, and then a week later I see you in Long Beach, and I'm sure you had a couple stops in between, right? So you talk about the density of the schedule. I want you to take your coach's hat off, and I want you to put your parent hat on, right? Because I mean, you're going to be coming into this here in a few years, and I'm starting to get into this with mine, and so. What advice would you give to parents when it comes to uh, the density of the schedule, right? Like parents in many cases feel like my kid's got to be at everything. Like, little Ricky's got to be in this tournament, Wednesday to Sunday, we're going to turn around, come home, be home for 2 days. Then we got to go back out to Arizona or Georgia or Florida or wherever and be in this tournament for that weekend. And then we're going to come home and do it all over again. What, as a parent who has this experience, right, as a coach, what advice would you give to other parents who are in that situation?
I think uh I think asking questions is, I think, huge, like using your network to find out on both sides, like an interest level from the coach that maybe you're really dreaming about. Or I think what's coming back into play, kind of similar to back when I was in California, is like I think because of the early recruiting rules and everything, I think you see like those prospect camps at the universities being a genuinely good thing. It's not a money grab anymore. I think that's how you actually get seen early on. And then, it was interesting, and I'm not trying to. I hope nobody gets mad at me because I'm just trying to be honest. Um, it was really interesting this go around with like how the portal has been set up from a date standpoint, and then like with the events, like and maybe but I just think those first 3 weeks of the portal, like there's a lot of high school events going on, and I just don't see how beneficial it could be to be out there on the road playing those games if no coaches are in the stands, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I think obviously getting your film is huge. But yeah, I think just asking questions, knowing what coaches are actually looking for, what events they're actually going to be at, and then really leaning into the camp portion of it, I think is really beneficial. But I think we talk about this all the time, and so I think that's the best way to do it with recruits is like, so when you're trying to figure out what events to go to, one, try to figure out what schools are going to be there, and then match that up. Is that going to be beneficial for me with my skill set? Like, can I play at any of these schools that are going to be at that event? Like, if not, then why am I going? um the other piece is, be honest with yourself with those schools. Like, we tell guys, make sure you're making a decision based on that degree. Like, is that degree something that really matters to you? Second piece, is that a place that the people that you'd be surrounded with would be the right people? And then third, is the chance to play relatively quickly going to be an actual thing? Because I think if you make your decision based off that, then the adults in the room can figure out the financial piece. Um, but so on the events, there's so many to choose from. It's like, make sure you're going to, is the region of the school important to you? So are you going to an event that only East Coast schools are on, or only West Coast schools are on? It's like, I think there's a number of factors. So I feel bad. I wish we could do like, I mean, maybe that's a new thing I should do for like online, is just, have conversations with parents, honestly, and call it a camp or something like that. But
Yeah. Well,
because we want to,
the NCAA might have something to say
I
about
know,
that,
I know. But
right? But look, that's a good segue though, Jake. I mean, because we get that question a lot, right? Like I get that question a ton. Like, what coaches are going to be at the event, or what's the benefit for me to come to this event, sort of thing. And we go through our explanation of that. And you touched on a lot of different things about asking questions, and making sure that there's a good academic fit and things of that nature. But so, as a follow up to the prior question, what advice are would you give to parents who have a son who's, say, 25 right now, who's uncommitted, looking to play college baseball?
I think you need to go. I think one, I want to say sorry, because like your classes, I think just with all the different things coming into a perfect storm, I think you guys are getting hurt the worst. So I would like to say sorry, and from a genuine standpoint. But I think I think you need to go somewhere where you can play, and then I think you can make a decision if that, based off that going forward. But again, it's just getting harder to play high level Division 1 baseball. So I think ultimately you got to find a place you can play. And I think the other piece of that is, don't be afraid. It doesn't like it that D1 or bust mentality or whatever. I think can can poison you a little bit. I'll be the my experience. I played D2 baseball, and it was the best decision I ever did. Met my wife there. Had a great experience, lifelong friends. So um, I think every level, as long as it matches up with your skill set, can be an unbelievable experience. And I think that's the coach's jobs, is to make it that.
Yeah, and I think it's also the players and parents' job to be realistic about their skill sets too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone is a Division 1 baseball player just because you've been playing travel baseball since you were 8 years old. So I think that's a really critical element of things in today's world in particular. But Jake, let's transition, to Michigan baseball, and year two, as you mentioned, for you there as the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator, and so going into the spring of 2025, what can fans expect from the Wolverines next spring?
We just got done with day one the other day, so that was awesome. I think you're gonna see some serious physicality. I think you're gonna see both on the mound and at the plate. some improved physicality and overall tool set. We had 25 new players, so um, it's a vastly different roster. We're lucky a majority of our best players are back. And then, we did a good job. Both both high school, JUCO, portal again, that blend. Feel really confident with our group. Just, the hardest part, and we talked about earlier in this conversation, though, is when you have a big new roster, is like that gelling piece and making sure that the dugout and the locker room are healthy. And I think that's where we have to spend a lot of our time, is making sure that the team piece is really, really good. We're really lucky last year. Our locker room and our leaders were amazing. And so I think just making sure that gets carried on and passed down. Um, and Skip does an incredible job of that. I think the way that he sets up for a really organic leadership model, is something that's really led to a lot of his success. I think that's one of his strengths. Um, and yeah, I really we return majority of our best arms. We lost Denner obviously to graduation. He was unbelievable, but we got a lot of good additions to an already positive state of affairs on the mound. So I'm excited about that. And then on the position player side, like, you know, it depends what publication you look at, but they were giving us a lot of love on what that class looks like. So, um, our job's just not to screw them up and make sure they learn how to um, play with a real chip on their shoulder. So I'm excited about the group. It's a great group. It's not a very vocal group. It's a lot of guys that lead by example. So that'll be fun to work with. But we got some characters. You know me and my personality. I gotta recruit some big personalities to make sure that we're meshing pretty good. So
With the expansion of the Big Ten, I mean, how exciting is it for you guys as a staff to be able to compete with and against, some of the programs that are coming in from the West Coast,
yeah, I think
broadening your guys' reach, right?
absolutely. I think that was one of the things that people were like, "Oh, are you happy? Are you sad that those guys are coming in?" And I was like, well, honestly, like, because those schools, I'm sure in the past, maybe some of the schools that I was even at, like we might have said like, "Oh, Big Ten, you don't want to play in the cold," right? We'd use that against them.
Right.
It's like, well, now they do too, so they can't use that one anymore, and our setup's even better. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
it all goes together. But no, like, you know, with Coach Waz at Oregon bringing his group in, and Eddie at UW coming in, and Stanky at USC coming in, and obviously Coach Savage coming in. Like, I think when you bring in such four solid staffs and the rosters that they bring with it, I think from just a pure RPI standpoint, I think it just jumps the Big Ten up an incredible degree. So obviously the difficulty of the conference will continue to rise as everybody does, but I think from an overall big picture standpoint, I think it only benefits the Big Ten. Hopefully making it a 6 to 8 bid league every single year, if we all schedule correctly and do it. I think it could be really, really cool and game changing for the conference.
Yeah, and last question for me, Jake, is what are you most excited about after your one day of practice, fall practice? What are you most excited about with this group heading into the 2025 season with again that expanded conference and just a whole lot? It seems like there's just a ton of opportunity on the table for the University of Michigan baseball program.
Yeah, I think honestly, just trying to what I'm most excited about is to see how we do as a coaching staff of gelling this group, because I think talent wise, I think we are in a really good spot. Um, so I'm really excited to see our arms compete. We actually have our first scrimmage tomorrow. So I'm excited to see the arms. I'm just excited, honestly, to see what we got going on here because I think we're, like you said, I think the opportunity is ripe for the taking. So I'm just hoping our guys understand the big picture of it and are ready to
Did you
strike
get
when
it?
they have the
Did you get
ability
it?
to. Yeah, I
Did you
got it.
get it? Yeah, all
Yeah, I got it.
right.
Uh, but it's gonna be fun. I think the coaching staff that Skip has put together has been awesome. Like everybody really gels. I think it's a lot of like-minded individuals, and then obviously the roster on the field. I think all of it paired together. I think I'm just really excited about University of Michigan because there's this. It's what Michigan does. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fired
That,
up.
that's awesome. Well, Jake, man, again, I can't thank you enough for making some time doing this. I know you're busy with the fall just getting started, but I really do appreciate you coming on here just and chatting baseball and obviously speaking a little bit directly towards parents and hopefully they glean some information from you. So I appreciate you
No,
doing this.
I appreciate Les. Just we've known each other a long time, man. You've always done a great job in whatever hat you're wearing, and I know from a where it comes from standpoint, like everybody knows where it comes from, and it's a true passion for our game, and so I've always appreciated what you've done. So anything I can do to help ever, if you're a normal person and doing it for the right reason, I'd be willing to do just about anything. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you,
it's
man.
awesome. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right, step that golf game up.
Oh, dude, it needs work.
Well, that's a good thing. That just means you're working hard. So,
Right, exactly. No time to play golf.
right.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. See you, man.